Well, welcome to, I think will be a fabulous panel that we're having here today, and it's really a part of the work that the Aspen Institute has been partnering with SLAC. And I'll tell you a little bit about that at the moment, and we're also happy to have the Attorney General of Colorado here, so I'm gonna introduce them and then give a little bit of context of strategies for supporting employment for returning persons in communities. So, to my direct left is Kenyatta Leal, who is the Executive Director of Next Chapter Project. And in the middle is Natrina Gandana, who's Senior Program Manager for SLAC for Good, and Attorney General Phil Weiser from the state of Colorado. Now, what we've talked about a lot in these sessions is the whole idea of cross-sector work when it comes to focusing on the challenges that exist in our communities. And for me, ground zero is reentry. When you really think about the importance of cross-collaboration, cross-agency collaboration, reentry is critical to the success of individuals who are returning back to their communities. So Aspen has been really excited to work with SLAC this past year on the Rework Reentry project, which is really a project that identifies systemic barriers that connects returning persons with meaningful employment in the tech industry. But we're also excited about the implications it has for all types of industries, both in the public and private sector. And Aspen Digital, which is a wonderful partner organization with us within Aspen, has been working very diligently with us. And as of today, we'll publish a playbook for tech industries to be able to use the recommendations to be able to do this in their own sectors. So we're so excited about it, and it actually comes out today. Yes. And that means that all of you will have access to the playbook. We'll make sure you all have access to it. So we're very excited about that. So let's start with the conversation, and we're gonna actually start with Natrina. So Natrina, tell us about your relationship with Next Chapter, how it fits in with SLAC for Good, and how you got to know Kenyatta.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you all for being here. Like I mentioned, my name is Natrina Gandana. I am a Senior Program Manager here at SLAC for Good. And to give a little color, I started off doing this work with an organization called The Last Mile, which is a coding boot camp across many different prisons, supporting currently incarcerated people to succeed in tech. And at the time, I was program director. We had 11 prisons and all of these amazing students. But the question I got time and time again was, what does my future really look like? Will people actually hire me? And we had tech executives and CEOs come in and say, tech is an equalizer, tech levels the playing field. But is that really true for people coming out of prison? And so we were thinking about, how do we actually make a real change here? And that's when Stuart Butterfield, the CEO of SLAC, came into San Quentin to actually meet our students. And again, we've had a lot of CEOs come in and kind of, talk the talk. And so we had a student ask him point blank, will you hire us? And he said, yes. And obviously we had no idea what that meant, and we uncovered so much in the process. But there, alongside Kenyatta, we started building Next Chapter. And Deepti Rohatgi, who is the head of SLAC for Good, actually called me one day and said, what would you do with all the resources of a tech company? Which I'm sure is a dream question for any program director. And we really started thinking about, yes, obviously capital, financial capital is great, but there's so much more tech can offer. Tech can offer valuable resources like their people, their time, their hours. As we were figuring out what the blueprint of Next Chapter would look like, it elucidated on so many barriers that we had no idea were there, such as legacy barriers, HR barriers, cultural barriers, all of these different things. And so I think we had a really great idea, and we were really nervous about whether or not it would work. And so we started off with 3 apprentices, very small, and 1 hiring partner, that being SLAC. And after 8 months of that program, all 3 of those individuals were hired in full-time place as software engineers, making 6 figures and getting stock options. This was incredible. So we said, maybe this could work with other companies. The next year, we expanded to Slack, Zoom, Dropbox, and Square. All of those apprentices that were selected also got full-time hired. This year, I'm really proud to announce, alongside Kenyatta and the Next Chapter team, that we have 14 tech companies. So you can see right now our mission is, 1, create a more equitable workplace for people coming out of incarceration, by transforming the tech sector. And I think we focused for the last 5-6 years really on creating a more equitable workplace for people who are coming out of incarceration. And now this year, we're really focusing on transforming the tech sector because we wanted to prove that the model worked. Now we know the model works. All of our apprentices are full-time hired at their partner companies. They are creating intergenerational wealth. They're supporting their families. They're getting promotions, buying houses, cars, all of it. So it's really, really incredible. But now we want to make this impact even larger. So this is why we've partnered with the Aspen Institute to create Rework Reentry, so that people no longer have an excuse, one, and also saying that this is hard work, but it is worth it. And I think that we didn't even know how hard it was going to be when we started it, and now uncovering all of this great comprehensive research on how exactly this could be done has been huge for Slack, for Next Chapter, as well as for hopefully with Aspen as well. And so our goal is to empower more companies to take the first step and actually do this and have the legitimacy and credibility to back it up. Because again, we see that the program works, we're excited about the opportunity, and we need more hiring partners. We want people who are excited, and look, they get great talent too. So this is a win-win all around. And so obviously Kenyatta and I have been working together on this for 10 years. It's been a labor of love, a lot of work, and we're really excited to see it grow.
Can I ask a question, Natrina, on
Please.
this? I know you've expanded to 14
Yes.
tech companies, which is really exciting. What's your vision in terms of including more tech companies, and in addition to that, other types of private sector industries?
I mean, I think right now, because we are so focused on engineering, and we want to make sure that we're not going to, engineering is hard. And I think that in itself is a lot of work and a lot of hard work on our apprentices as well. And we see that these are the opportunities that are maintaining. I mean, after COVID, the first jobs to get cut are what they say is non-essential. The last jobs to get cut are these individuals that are doing these high-wage careers. So we want to aim for the highest, and hopefully with all the learnings that we get from the playbook, from just our work in general with Next Chapter and all these other tech companies, it does not just create a more equitable workplace for people who are coming out of prison, but an equitable workplace for all. You know, we want to think about how companies are looking inside their own house, you know? When you look at a barrier here of, no, we don't accept people who have a criminal background, we don't accept people who don't have college degrees. Well, why? You know, let's really interrogate those kinds of thinking and really look at the potential of individuals. So I think our hope obviously is to expand, but right now we're mainly focused on engineering roles because we see there's a huge opportunity, as well as they're getting that generational wealth. Again, these are high-wage careers. This is the difference between job training and career training. And I think a lot of the times people underestimate people who are coming out of incarceration, right? They don't expect excellence, and we are challenging these companies to expect excellence, and they'll get excellence.
That's great. So you mentioned you've been working with Kenyatta.
How am I supposed to follow that?
You're going to be great, Kenyatta. So tell us about that. I mean, how did you get to know each other, and tell us about your work?
So I first met Natrina when I was incarcerated. I spent over 20 plus years in the California prison system. And while I was at San Quentin, I helped found a program called The Last Mile there. And Natrina and I worked together, you know, in different capacities with the organization. And when she was working on the initial pilot with Slack, she invited me to come over to Slack and meet with the head of HR and the head of Slack for Good at the time. And I went over there and had a conversation with them about my experience and how I thought I could help what they were working on at the time. And they brought me on as a reentry director to help help grow Next Chapter. And I just thought of it as a dream job for myself. Like I said, I spent over 20 years in prison, so to be able to come home, work with other men and women who are leaving incarceration and trying to get on a career path, to me, that was a blessing. And so it's not really work to me. You know, it really is a labor of love, and it's something that I'm really grateful for.
You know, we actually have a relationship in that I used to fund the Prison University project
Thank you for that, too, man.
from the Ford Foundation when I was there. Tell us, what are the challenges and opportunities in your work now?
Well, I think the biggest challenge for us in our organization is overcoming this, I think, just general fear, you know, of people who are leaving incarcerated settings. Let's face it, you know, the media is just saturated with, all these different, just different perceptions of who people in prison actually are. But I think, we use all this pejorative language to describe the people that are in there, inmate, convict, felon, you name it. But at the end of the day, they're people. And these are mothers, they're our fathers, they're our brothers, they're our sisters. And, we have, as society, have a unique opportunity to shape the world that they're coming back to, right? And so we believe that with support and with opportunity, that folks can get on the right track, be an asset to themselves, their families, and their communities.
Can you just unpack that a bit? Tell us more about the work itself.
Okay. So the work really consists of an 8-month apprenticeship program. It's a paid apprenticeship program. And we work with different community-based organizations that work with people leaving incarcerated settings. And we try to meet each individual where they're at, try to figure out, where those gaps are, and try to help get them on the path so that they could be, ready for a next chapter opportunity. A lot of that revolves around post-incarceration education, revolves around, we call them soft skills, but we know that these are the hardest skills to develop. So we work with partners to help folks ramp those skills up so that they can be prepared for these opportunities. And again, it's a paid 8-month apprenticeship. It starts with 3 months with our education partner, Hack Reactor. It's a really rigorous software development boot camp. And if they finish that successfully, then we place them for 5 months with one of our hiring partners. And there, they really have an opportunity to, we look at it as like, we try to describe it to them as like a 5-month kind of application process. They have an opportunity to really show what they know, but also have a great opportunity to be a sponge and just soak up as much knowledge as they can. And after those 5 months, if they're successful there, then they're offered a full-time opportunity to join the company. And thus far, we've had 31 people get to that point, and 31 people have been hired.
Okay, I want to boil that, well, I'm from South Carolina, and we say boil it down to the low gravy. So I'm going to call out Sandra Gaddy here from the Women's Resource Center, who was a part of a digital event with Slack that we had, when she was talking about the importance of navigational structures in communities, and you talked about partnering with community-based organizations. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Excuse me. So for example, here in Colorado, we work with an organization called Persevere. They work with people who are inside the prison system, teaching them software development skills so that they can come home and take this career path. And so that's just one example. Here in Colorado, we're partnering with them, and really, I think it's this public-private partnership that really can make a huge difference, in moving the needle in this work. But I'm really grateful to, the business community here, also, the folks at Persevere and what they're doing. It's very difficult work. It really is, to overcome all this stigma and stereotype around people leaving incarcerated settings, to create meaningful pathways for them. And so I think that here in Colorado, what we're doing with Persevere and Banyan Labs, I think we can create a model that other states can follow. When you have an organization like ours that is really focused on the job placement side. You have organizations that are working inside prison to help upskill the people that are there, so when they come home, they can pursue this career path. It's a win-win situation for everyone. And I'm happy to announce that we've got our first person from Persevere, from the state of Colorado, that's in our program. It's about to be placed at a major tech company in Silicon Valley, and he's going to be an engineer in a couple months, and I think that's pretty fantastic.
That's great. Well, I'm so glad you mentioned Colorado. We love Colorado, right?
Yes, we do.
And we are so happy and pleased to have the Attorney General for the state of Colorado, General Weiser. So you have been such an inspirational person in this field. You have really led the nation in terms of the work that you're doing here in Colorado. Could you talk a little bit more, particularly about your Fair Chance Hiring Initiative and how it connects to Kenyatta and the work that Slack is doing?
Well, let me pick up on what Kenyatta talked about, which is we're talking about people. And it was 5 years ago, or maybe 4 years ago, I met a person named Kenny Cobbins, who was serving a long prison sentence. And in one of our prisons, we have a dog training program. And he said those dogs saved his life. Because when he left, he went to a program called Cross Purpose, a group we've given a grant to, a community-based organization, that helped him get a job. He was actually working at night for a friend of mine who's a Fair Chance hire, and during the day he was building his dog training business. Well, now he's only doing his dog training business. There's an article about him, you can read about him. And That is a story of a person. What Kenyatta said is pretty important. The amount of demonization, categorization, distancing from inmate, convict, felon, is part of what we are up against. Because if it's Kenny with a personal story, that's really different. And I thought, and I remember being in a meeting with Cross Purpose and the head of our Department of Corrections, there is a tremendous opportunity for a fair chance hiring initiative. We actually picked the term fair chance as opposed to second chance deliberately. Because for a lot of people, and there's a good Harvard Business School case study about a company in Cincinnati that hires a lot of folks who are returning community members, someone said, I never really had a chance before to get the type of jobs that Kenyatta just was talking about. So this is meant to give people that opportunity. It is a win many times over because the employers get a benefit too. They often are praising the committed service of returning community members. And obviously from a public safety standpoint, cutting down on the rate that people end up reoffending is a huge public safety benefit. So this opportunity is extraordinary. We did first a feasibility study. We worked with Harris, who's here, and then launched with the Latino Coalition a fair chance hiring program. And the idea is to work on the issue from both sides. One, we need employers to get past that hesitation. We need to create norms that employers are saying, we have a social obligation to think, can we do this? As opposed to, let's come up with reasons not to do this, which is too easy. And then with respect to people who are serving a sentence, what can we do during that time to help create that connectivity to get jobs? So obviously the Persevere initiative that's been mentioned is one we're really excited about. It's a great example. Kenny's dog training program would be another. We know how smart an investment this is. I forget which group, you'll probably know. Someone ranked all of the ways we can improve our criminal justice system, advance public safety from a social return on investment. The number one investment we as a society can make is improved reentry programs. In terms of bang for our societal buck. You often hear this phrase, government should be more like a business. I agree on this point. We should be making investments that have a strong return on investment. If we take that point seriously, this reentry opportunity is compelling and is an imperative, and that's why we're excited to drive it forward in Colorado.
So, you know, we have so many representatives in communities that represent community-based organizations, government, the private sector. So this is such a great example of a collaboration from the community to the state to a private company. So can you all just sort of unpack all of that for us? How did this come about?
I mean, when you think about it, we've come up with 1,000 ways to make sure an aluminum can or a plastic bottle gets a new life, but far too few to make sure that somebody getting out of prison actually gets a new life. And so Natrina and I, when we really first started working on this, that was really our goal, was to create something that that really counters that, you know? And when you invest in people, then you can get these kind of outcomes, you know? Looking at this education gap and this opportunity gap, we were just committed from the very beginning to do something to make a difference. And there were a lot of people that were close to us that told us straight to our faces, you guys aren't going to be able to do this. You're too young, you're too junior. Kenyatta, you just got out of prison, you're not going to be able to pull this off. And look at us now. So, I mean, I think that you know, you have to dream big and you have to have bold leadership to make this kind of change happen. And I just got to tip my hat to Stuart Butterfield and the leadership of the SLAC team, because, you know, without that bold leadership that we were speaking about, you know, our program wouldn't exist today. So
I have some experience with this. When I was at the Ford Foundation as a program officer for higher ed, I asked Darren Walker, the president of the foundation, to come with us inside a prison in upstate New York because we were funding the Barred Prison Initiative. And one of the students asked the question, well, when I get out, can I have a job with the Ford Foundation? So Darren went back and we immediately set up a program called the Barred Associates Program. But we also asked a lot of people who are our partners, what is it that we need to do internally in the organization to support the success of individuals in the BARD Associates Program? So I'm going to go back to the company piece, and I'm going to talk politics with you in a second. So what's necessary inside the organization to change the culture, to deal with the culture, and also support individuals who may have suffered trauma while inside prison? Tell us a little bit about what do you guys do for that?
Yeah, I mean, I'll talk a little bit about the work that we do with companies. You know, when Slack first initially decided to do Next Chapter and commit to this program, they were nervous, you know, rightfully so. This is the first time that it was that they were creating a program like this. They didn't know half of the issues that would transpire. But with every single barrier that came through, it'd be easy to be like, okay, never mind, too hard. But instead, they were like, let's keep going. Let's keep pushing. Let's keep digging and see what we can do. And I think that it required a lot more cultural onboarding than I had originally, thought about. I mean, I had been working inside prisons for a long time, so I was like, oh yeah, this is totally fine, you know? But we really need to get people to understand and be proximate to the issue. So much of what we hear in the media and in movies and everything like that is this fear-based mindset. And so if you're working with someone who is labeled as a criminal, are you gonna feel safe? And so the first step is to dispel those myths. You know, that's not true. And that proximity was really number one. And in the beginning, we actually ended up having maybe 200 volunteers go into San Quentin from Slack to tutor our students, to work side by side with them. And the moment they go into San Quentin, the moment they meet our students, the moment they're inside a prison facility, their mind changes immediately. They see people as people. You know, they see them not as, an inmate, but as Kenny, you know, as individuals, as a potential coworker. And so then we were, from Stuart Butterfield's direction as executive and that leadership, we really were able to start like a groundswell of support because he made it a commitment. Not only did he, encourage people to visit San Quentin, but he also made sure that for the holiday gift, everyone was given Just Mercy by Brian Stevenson. This is a huge commitment on Slack's part, as well as an organizational and leadership shift. So the cultural onboarding is one, and then we have the real, actual hard work of legal barriers, HR barriers, policy barriers, legacy barriers, all of which you'll see more of in the playbook, so you can see how we were able to really work through those. But that required a lot of hours, people who had to volunteer those hours when they had their own deliverables and regular business bottom line to attend to. So it was a lot of collaboration, but I think the thing that gets people to do that work is understanding the purpose behind it, right? Knowing that this is the thing to do, not only the morally right thing to do, but the better thing to do for the company, and also to get the best type of employee as well as the best product possible. So there's a lot of benefits I see that businesses have from this, but again, a lot of work. And I think that at the end of the day, like I mentioned, when we first created created Next Chapter at Slack, we were nervous about how people were going to react. Would people quit? Would people be scared? And now, 6 years later, it is a beloved program at Slack. It is one of the reasons why people join Slack to begin with. And so we see actually a business benefit in retention and recruitment.
Watching people real quick, back on that, watching the Slack team go from fear to love was an incredible process. And it happened over time. I remember when I first went to Slack, they had an all-hands meeting, and they were really transparent about what they were trying to accomplish. And they invited John Legend to come and speak about, his experience with incarceration. He has, family members who've been incarcerated, and I think that, it's that kind of engagement that really helped folks understand that, this is a problem that impacts a lot of us. I mean, how many folks in this room right now know somebody or have a family member that's been incarcerated? So, I mean, that tells the story right there. And so, I think transparency, really what the AG had spoke about at the proximity piece, bringing people together, and really focused on making a difference, not just talking the talk, but really walking the walk.
You mentioned something, Natrina, that I wanted to bring up, and I'm glad we have the AG on the stage so he can talk us through this. The legal challenges. There are over 45,000 pieces of legislation, in the books that are barriers to employment. Right. Can you talk about how you address that in Colorado, and what's your recommendation for others to think about rethinking the sort of legal side of this when it comes to those barriers, particularly in the face of a pushback now to criminal justice reform, which we'll also have a panel on that tomorrow. But can you talk a little bit about that?
We in Colorado last year, as part of our overall initiative, worked on a bill that would re-examine and address a series of punitive licensing restrictions. So I'm not familiar with the exact ones. I should get the examples correct, but I'm going to give you some that are directionally correct. In order to be a massage therapist, you can't have ever committed a felony. Again, I'm not sure if that's exact here in Colorado, but there's something like that that's true. There's no basis for someone who is involved in forgery or some other effort, burglary as a young person, to say you can't work as a massage therapist. You're taking people's opportunities away without a basis in public health or public safety. It's just based on fear or to be unduly punitive. Colorado had another law that we fixed, which, again, totally brain dead. If you hadn't addressed fines that you were levied because of your involvement in the criminal justice system, they would take away your driver's license. Just dumb, punitive, so you couldn't drive to work or couldn't drive your family members, and make it harder to pay the fines that they were supposedly concerned about, and creating hazards on the roads as well. So there have been a lot of laws that were passed in a moment of, we got to be just tough on criminals, and we label people criminals and we exclude them from opportunities. Those laws are counterproductive and inhumane. They're counterproductive because the goals they're supposedly advancing, public health and public safety, aren't being advanced. And they're punitive because people who already aren't those with the best opportunities are finding themselves frustrated even more. And so we're working on this in Colorado, and the challenge is to peel back those restrictions to what's truly necessary. And look, there are going to be some professions that may have some legitimate basis to say, we're not sure we're comfortable. But let's start pushing back and unpeeling a lot of these that are just purely fear-based with no reasoned rationale.
I have a phrase I used to use when I used to do sessions with mayors at the Kennedy School, and that is, you either frame an issue or be framed. Mm-hmm. So I would love for you guys to talk about the communications framing around this from the perspectives of the work that you're doing. How do you frame this in a way?
I'll start.
Okay.
If you care about public safety, you care about people not leaving prison and committing more crimes, number one. Number two, if you care about fairness, you don't put, and this is a biblical phrase, everyone's free to use it, a stumbling block in front of the blind. You let someone out for prison with $25 and they're homeless that night, you really think they're going to find their way to a productive life? Is that fair? Is that realistic? And then to employers, I say, it's an opportunity for you. You need workers. Yeah. Look at this opportunity. So, it's all three of those messages. Some people may hear one more than the other. As long as they get with the program, I'm okay with whatever message works for them.
Okay. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think with employers, what we see is exactly right? You are getting a quality employee. This is not a handout. This is not a charity program. This is a really great hire, and you have 8 months to invest in this 8-month program with all the vetting behind it, all the additional support to really invest in creating a really great employee. Really investing in potential is what we try to advocate for our employers to do. See the business benefit, not only as getting a good hire, but also obviously retaining your staff and encouraging your culture in a way that is morally righteous, that people can get behind, that really does serve justice and opportunity.
Kenyatta?
Yeah, I think that they hit a lot of the points that I would cover, but at the same time, I would say that, we have so many people, upwards of 600,000 people per year that are getting out of prison, and jails and prisons, and they need jobs for the same reasons that all the rest of us do, for economic advancement, pursue their goals and be contributors in their communities. And I just feel like, to the AG's point, it's all about fairness. You know, when somebody's done their time and come home, they should have an opportunity to redeem themselves. And I think, at least in my mind, when I got out of prison, you know, a big part of what I thought about redemption meant to me was hard work, right? If I come out and I work hard, then, you know, people can respect hard work, you know, but sometimes people come home, they work hard, and they still, you know, don't have those opportunities presented to them. And so I just think this, you know, overall fairness is something that I would really focus on and communicate with folks about this.
Okay, one last question, so I know we're having time here. So I am a city council member. I'm head of a community-based organization. I am the head of a business in the private sector. I am someone who works in state government at the state level, which is representative of all the people here. I'm a county commissioner. What advice would you give them with respect to the work that you're doing?
I would say invest in people. Be bold. Invest in the people in your community. Create pathways for them to be successful. You know, it's so easy to fall into this cycle of helplessness and then hopelessness, you know? And we actually have, you know, I believe an obligation, you know, to create these kind of pathways for folks coming home, because they can't do it by themselves.
First thing, read the playbook, right? It just came out. We worked really hard on it. But yeah, so obviously on that same note, it's we ask so much of people coming out of incarceration to do the hard work. And I think it's time for tech companies and employers to do the hard work. You know, invest in potential, invest in your systems, do your audits inside to make sure that everything is looking good, that the policies in place are actually policies that actually support your initiatives rather than, you know, overlooking talent that could be really great for your company. So do the hard work but they can't do it alone.
Start trying things. It can be small, it can be a pilot project, and build from there. And find collaborators to work with across all these sectors, community organizations, businesses, government. You're gonna have different sorts of collaborators. And in different communities, they'll be different. But start with the people who wanna collaborate and then build on success.
Okay, that is great. So I just want to say, and we're going to transition to Q&A, so I'll give my thank yous at the end of that, because I have a lot to thank you guys for, but thank you so much for that. So we're going to transition to Q&A. So Zenobia Edwards, you'll forgive me, Zenobia, so sometimes I call you Collins, so that was her maiden name, but... So, Zenobia Edwards from South Carolina. And please identify yourself, but you don't have to because I just identified you.
Thank you, Doug. I appreciate that. This is such a great effort, so I have to just say a big applause to you for doing it. My question is this: with your program, is there a requirement that your participants have a high school diploma, or do you do on-the-job training with the tech companies? What are the requirements to get into your program?
That's a good question.
So to answer that, no, we don't require a high school diploma. The main two requirements are that you're formally incarcerated and that you have about six months to a year's worth of software development training, whether that be inside through a program like Persevere or The Last Mile, or once they come home, get involved in some kind of post-incarceration education. There's tons of free, you know, information that folks can get on the internet. And we try to, you know, point folks in the right direction to help them get on the right track.
Can I just underscore, this is probably a different Aspen Institute program, but it's important. What Kenyatta's talking about is adjacent to what needs to be a revolution in how we think about education and job training. We have to get away from, do you have a high school diploma, do you have a college degree, to do you have the skills that we find other ways to credential to do the job.
I heard amen out there. Other questions? Yes, in the back right there, and that is our city councilwoman, Latanya Tate, who, by the way, is the chair of the Public Safety Committee of the City Council of Birmingham.
And who's a mother of a formerly incarcerated son. First of all, Kenyatta, welcome home, brother.
Thank you.
Thank you for telling the listening audience how important language is, because that's a big thing in criminal justice, because these are humans. I really like what you guys have done, and I'm here, with a lot of the people from Birmingham. The county commissioner is over there, and these are some of the things that we have been talking about. I'm very interested in the expansion of your program, in Birmingham. What does that look like? Is it room for expansion? Because I know a lot of formerly incarcerated individuals that are in Birmingham that can really use this opportunity in the tech world.
Absolutely. We are looking to collaborate with communities like yours and people that are in your community around this work. I feel like when we have organizations that really care about the populations that are coming home, if we're able to couple that with folks from the business community, some bold leadership from the business community, willing to give folks a chance, maybe like the AD said, start small with maybe a pilot and grow it from there. But there's definitely a possibility for us to work together and do something really amazing in Birmingham for the folks there that need it most. So after this, I will find you and we'll make something happen.
And to add to that, a lot of the work that we do with Next Chapter is remote. So if you have people right now who are interested, we can get them in.
That's so cool. Sandra Gaddy, I mentioned you earlier. She is the head of the Women Resource Center in Grand Rapids, Michigan. She was on our other Slack panel, the digital event focused on this topic. Sandra.
Yes, thank you all for being here. I have two questions. One, could you speak into any pre-release initiatives that you may have in jail or prisons? But also, could you just speak more into unpacking of the language? Both of us, my brother's was formerly in prison as well, and fair chance versus second chance was that just really resonated with me. And I love using that language over second chance. So can you speak into the power of language and labels, especially not only once citizens are released, but while they're in jail and while they're in prison? One of the counties that we work with no longer uses inmate or convicts. They refer to all of their persons in jail as citizens. And I think that needs to happen throughout the system.
I think to your first question around pre-release initiatives, we don't have anything at this particular time, but we work with partners like Persevere, like The Last Mile, who do. And so that is not really our core competency right there, but we work with partners who, that is their core competency. And so to the next.
I could mention, on the first question, Colorado has a program that's now known as Breakthrough. It was previously called Defy. And the goal is to develop what you might call an entrepreneurial mindset. And another phrase, soft skills are the hard skills, that is complementary to what we're talking about. It's a great organization that is in the prisons pre-release. There's obviously a lot of different work that can be done. The Persevere work is really exciting because you want that transition, and speaking about language, here's a phrase we're using, returning community members, that is a dangerous moment, right? In the most dangerous version, you put a stumbling block for somebody, and we should acknowledge many people in this group may have had challenges in the past with substance use disorder. And so that's another thing to be mindful about. Are you helping people stay in recovery too? So helping people stay in recovery, find jobs, find housing, the more you can set people up for that successful reintegration, the more likely they're going to not end up reoffending. They haven't given the shout out yet. They've had 31 graduates. How long this has been operating for now?
About 4 years.
4 years, not a single case of recidivism.
Ooh. That's fantastic.
I mean, let's face it, if you're making 140 grand a year and you got stock options with the company, who wants to go commit another crime, right?
Exactly.
Not me.
Do you have a mic? Thanks, Will.
How are you doing? I'm the director at the Juvenile Detention Facility in Birmingham, and previously came from Georgia and worked with the U.S. Attorney's Office. We were able to help the state of Georgia to remove those barriers. We had a robust reentry program, but the state was championing private industry to hire formerly incarcerated individuals, but the state was not hiring them themselves. So I didn't know if Colorado had changed their position on that as well. And then my follow-up question was, do you all have any thoughts about the juvenile population and this probably being a prevention measure from going into the prison pipeline?
Good.
On the first question, I don't know exactly right now Colorado's posture. We need to look more into that. It's a good question. And then your second question was juvenile. So I've worked on the front end for juveniles, which is often called the school to prison pipeline, where there's too much of a readiness to put young people into the criminal justice system. And we've worked to encourage high schools and others in decision-making capacity not to do that. And instead, we've encouraged diversion programs like the outdoor education. And we've, in fact, got a $5 million Healthy Youth Strong Colorado initiative with a strong outdoor ed component for young people. Because part of what's going on, this got mentioned earlier, trauma. If there's a young person in a school acting in a way that could be labeled criminal, there's a pretty good chance if you sat down and said, what's going on with you right now? Are you experiencing some trauma at home? You're going to get a whole different understanding than if you say, you're a criminal, we're putting you in the criminal justice system.
And I'd like to
Yeah, sure.
add that, when I was program director of The Last Mile, we actually launched a program, a TLM program, a coding boot camp with Ventura County Juvenile Justice. So we actually were teaching the kids, and it was so great because they are so good. They're digital natives already. So it was really exciting to see them. And also, obviously, our hope is eventually when they feel ready and they're excited that maybe they'd be interested in working with Next Chapter.
Absolutely. We've only got, 31 people now, but I like to think of Next Chapter as our kind of underground railroad from the prison yard into tech. Mm-hmm. And our dream is to really create a super highway, from creating opportunities for folks to get into tech. And when you think about the tech economy and how tech influences all of our lives, it's big enough for all of us to have, a seat at the table there. And so I think teaching the skills that are necessary to enter the workforce in this place and then providing the support necessary, for folks to be able to make that transition is going to be super important over the next few years. But that's where we're at. That's what we aim to do.
Any other questions? Aaron from Grand Valley State University in Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much to all of you for presenting here before us and for the excellent work you're doing here in Colorado. So I just had a quick question about how do we guard against the backlash that will come, right? And I say will, like intentionally, right? Inevitably will come when someone in a program like this, and not necessarily in your program, but in other programs similar, right, will stumble, right, as all human beings do, right, and some crime is committed. We've seen it in the 90s, right, where that sort of thing. I just think of Michigan. In Michigan's case, we had a couple of high-profile cases that then led to all sorts of very harsh punitive legislation that lasted for decades, right? And so how do we guard against that backlash when even a small mistake happens, right?
Well, I think that when it comes to situations like that, we can't get bogged down by fear. I think it's the fear that drives that kind of response that you get to stuff that happens, and stuff does happen, we know. But we need to stay focused, I think, on the big picture here. And programs like ours are win-win, not just for the individual, not just for the company, but for society in general. And so I think that's where we need to stay focused on, is the big picture and not get bogged down in fear of one incident or another.
Let me take this in the context of a company, because I think the companies are going to have to get past their fear, and then, to your point, if something stumbles, the challenge will be, will the naysayers be like, you see, we shouldn't be doing this. Mm-hmm. What I'm hearing, and Slack is obviously the platinum standard, the deeper the exposure, the broader the understanding, I think you build some grace and pardon the pun, slack that will help you when something happens.
Yeah.
Because you are right. If you are hiring returning community members, it is not realistic to expect a 0% recidivism rate because the population as a whole, it's not 0%. So we have to be prepared for at some point something happens, and if the company has a broader understanding, has a deeper commitment, people will say, we're sorry this happened. That doesn't mean the whole concept is wrong.
Yeah, exactly right. Thank you, AG. I think that, we want to prevent guardrails. I mean, we want to have guardrails, so we want to do very intense vetting. We have a very rigorous 6-step interview process to ensure that not only are they, hard skills capable, but they are also, I think, what we encourage is a real deep understanding of your own rehabilitation in a way, to make sure that that it's not what you did, but it's what you've done thus far, whether that be mental health service programs, drug abuse awareness programs, all of these other programs that make you a full person. What are those that we can look at just to ensure that additional level of safety? And then to another point, I think it's also, yes, there could be a risk that a reoffense may happen, but that's a risk across everyone, right? Anyone you hire can commit a crime, and we see that happens, So I think that keeping that focus and doing that deep intentional cultural work is really part of the guardrails.
So I'm Tasha Blackman, first of all, from Cherry Health in Grand Rapids, Michigan.
And by the way, Tasha, tell them what Cherry Health is in terms of how big you guys are and your
Sure.
scope.
So Cherry Health is a federally qualified health center providing medical, dental, behavioral health services to under-resourced individuals. So our footprint is 21 locations across the state of Michigan. And last year, we provided 544,000 visits. We've got about 1,000 employees, and just a huge organization supportive to the reentry population. So we operate a correctional health program, that's what we call it, for returning citizens, both in the Detroit, Michigan area and Grand Rapids. And in that particular program, we meet any gaps that they might have in their education. We reacclimate them to their families. We also do trauma-informed care. And part of the reason in counseling, because we want to address the criminogenic thinking, to understand the source of that trauma. And many times there is an underlying trauma that has happened to these individuals. And we also do job skills placement. Now, in our Detroit location, we actually provide job opportunities with the city of Detroit. So we have a contract. So they're coming out with city jobs with the road commission and along those lines. But I'd love to connect with you on what this opportunity might mean even for our individuals. And we have both males and females. And we just won a statewide contract with the Federal Bureau of Prisons because our guys are 3 times less likely to recidivate because of our process.
You guys want to respond to that, or?
Come to Colorado.
Yeah. And we should definitely have a conversation after this about how we might be able to collaborate, because I feel like if there are people in your in your network that that have a passion for tech and that want to pursue this as a career path, absolutely.
Great. Okay, Natrina, what's up next in New York and San Quentin?
New York, we're going to have Unfinished Live with the Aspen Institute, where Kenyatta will be presenting with our head of Slack for Good, Deepthi Rohatgi. And following along that, we'll be doing a Gatekeepers event at San Quentin, where we'll be inviting leaders as well as people from the business community to actually meet our students and really get proximate to the issue. So that'll happen before the end of the year.
Great. And the playbook comes out today. And you all have access to it. So
Next
and
week,
Jen and Weiser?
and you guys are around, Denver Startup Week, Harris, what day?
Tuesday, 2:30 p.m. downtown Denver at Denver Startup HQ. AG Weiser is going to be moderating a panel, and we have a remote speaker doing performance with Joaquin Mobley. It's going to be awesome if you guys are in town.
So let me just say thank you so much. You guys were so great. So give them a round of applause. And the Aspen Institute has been so happy and pleased to work with SLAC. It's just been a great partnership, and we just look forward to our continuing dialogue and learning from each other. It's so great to have all of you here, and thank you for being here, because you've been great.